Welcome in to Week 16 Waiver Wire Q&A brought to you by FanDuel. I am here, JL Garofalo, joined by my good friend JJ Zachariason. How you doing today, JJ?
I'm good. I was just telling you before the show, I had a lot of close matchups in my fantasy playoffs, so I'm glad that stress is over.
You got to
It's
tell them what you told me. The four teams
yeah.
combined?
So I had four. So like there were some. It was just one of those weeks where like some of my good teams didn't do very well and didn't move on, and then some of my teams that are iffier got lucky. I had four separate. I mean, I'm in a lot of leagues, but I had four separate games this past week where I ended up winning all four of them. And the margin in total, the cumulative margin of victory in those four matchups was 3 fantasy points. So it was
Wild.
just only one of them was over 1 point. But I ended up winning. I was on the favorable side of all four of them. So it was a very, very, one of them was Cam Akers last night where I needed 11.4 half PPR points and he got it. And then the person I was facing reminded me that he had Jacoby Myers. So that was, Jacoby
Brutal.
Myers' mistake was the reason why I ended up winning that one.
-2 lateral.
Yeah, like Christian Watson last night got a random reception at the end of that game, and that's what did me in a league. There's another league where Graham Gano kicking that field goal put the Washington defense into a different points allowed bracket, so I ended up winning from that. I mean, it was just so many things sort of came together, and there was a lot of tilting, but it was fun at the end of the day.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you made four playoffs. That's a pretty good ratio, right?
I have a lot of other leagues in general. I think I'm still alive in the semis in like 40-ish% of my redraft leagues though. So
Pretty
it's a
good.
decent enough year. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty good ratio. JJ and I are here answering all your Week 16 waiver wire questions. We are coming down to the end of the fantasy football season here. Most people are already in their fantasy football playoffs or getting there. Hopefully, they've already started. So
Yeah.
now's the time where it matters. Now's the time where it matters. We already got some people here in the chat. JJ, we got Victor in here said, "Hey JJ, thank you. I made it to the semifinals in all 4 leagues. Lost Hurts in one of them, and they have their backup is Tom Brady. Does he play Tom Brady or pick up Carr and play him?"
Yeah, so I think this week Brady is in the better spot against Arizona. I don't mind Derek Carr per se, but that game doesn't project to be as favorable for Vegas as the Cardinals Bucks game does for Tampa Bay. Pittsburgh's defense has been playing a little bit better with TJ Watt back, over the last 5 or so games. Pittsburgh from an adjusted fantasy points allowed standpoint, they rank 18th according to my numbers, against quarterbacks, whereas Arizona is the 8th best matchup. Tom Brady, coming off the game that he had last week, you can feel a little bit more confident in him as well. So I'm gonna go Brady over Carr this week. I feel pretty good about that. You just have to hope that the touchdowns that they do score end up being some that are through the air, not on the ground.
Yeah, Tom Brady looked good for first part of that game. He looked like a little bit like his old self.
Yeah.
Promising. And then we got a follow-up question from Victor. He asks, Njoku or pick up Noah Fant or Ingram? So out of those 3 guys, which are you starting this week?
So it's really hard to, one of the themes this week is weather. There's a lot of bad weather games going around. I don't know if people have seen this, but if you look at the game in Cleveland, the Saints and Browns game, that game has a 31.5 point over under according to FanDuel Sportsbook, which I think I saw someone tweet that it was the lowest total since 2008. So the reason for that is because there's supposed to be like 25-mile-an-hour winds. There's gonna be a snowstorm, all that kind of stuff. You don't want to play pass catchers in that game for the most part. I mean, like, if you have Chris Olave, you probably don't want to go the Chris Olave route. If you have Amari Cooper, even, if you have a decent enough option, you won't want to go Amari Cooper. I think Cooper's probably right now like more of like a low-end wide receiver 3 or something. I mean, if that, right? Like you just have to be reasonable, just given these circumstances and given that total. If that total were like over 40 or something, it would be different because that means that people were expecting and the market is expecting there to be more points. But 31.5 is really hard to buy into any skill players in that game, including the quarterbacks, including the tight ends. I don't love Noah Fant in general, but he does. The Seahawks don't have Tyler Lockett this week, more than likely, so I could see more targets being funneled to their tight ends. including Noah Fant. So I think at the end of the day, I might actually go after Noah Fant over Njoku, even though Njoku 100%, would be the better play in like a neutral, normal weather environment. I think that you could go Noah Fant. It's a game that has a much, much higher probability to shoot out. No Tyler Lockett, I think should increase that target share for Noah Fant. So I think I'd go in that direction. And then the other one I'm seeing here is Njoku or Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram's a beast right now, man. He's going, they're using him properly. He's got like
ridiculous target share.
Yeah, I mean, his target share over the past 3 weeks has been 24.4%, 35.7%, and 21.2%. So he's averaging a 27% target share per game over his last 3. He scored 14, 39, and 14 PPR points. I don't know how you bench Evan Ingram at this point, right? It feels like Evan Ingram is going to be, to me, Ingram, just given this usage and given the fact that, they're facing a team in the Jets where you don't target the perimeter against the Jets that much because they have corners that can stop these perimeter wide receivers. So I wouldn't be shocked if even guys like Christian Kirk has a decent game just playing the slot, and then Evan Ingram, obviously, who can move around the formation. Wouldn't be shocked if those are the guys they target at a higher rate this week. And so, Ingram is in a pretty good spot. Like I think that you could realistically feel just as confident in a guy like Ingram as someone like TJ Hawkinson at this point. Like just a similar situation overall, maybe a little bit better about Hawk, but Ingram's been doing it and they're using him in a proper way, and he's getting it done. So Ingram to me is like I haven't done my tight end rankings, but he's probably a top 5 or 6 tight end this week.
I'm right there with you. Yeah. Jacksonville Jaguars are passing so much. It's ridiculous. And Ingram is, like you said, top of that target list there. We got Young Stinky in here. Nice name. Packers for the dub. And Dynasty Hot Sauce Pod asking Hurts replacement. You going Minshew, Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, or Brock Purdy?
I think that this is tough. I think you can go with either Minshew or Dimes. Wilson's still a little bit risky. I know that he looked okay against Detroit, but Detroit's been the best matchup for quarterbacks and adjusted fantasy points allowed. Jacksonville's not a bad matchup by any means, but it's still Zach Wilson. It's still a Thursday night game. Brock Purdy, I know that people are high on him, and I get it. And, I probably haven't been as high as I should have been on him over the last couple of weeks, but he's thrown a touchdown over his 3 starts. He's thrown a touchdown for every 102 passing yards. Passing yards and yards in general correlate to touchdowns. So, you can generally spot regression in a really high level basic way by looking at receiving yards or rushing yards versus touchdowns or passing yards versus touchdowns. The league average this year is 171 passing yards per touchdown. Brock Purdy's doing it every 102 yards. So that what that tells you is he's probably throwing touchdowns at a fairly unsustainable rate. But he does have good weapons, and he's probably going to be a little bit better than league average just because of that. But it's not like the best matchup, not the best scoring environment per se for Purdy. I don't mind him. I think that he could be like a high floor guy, but I don't see like a massive difference between him and someone like, Kenny Pickett maybe, or even Zach Wilson, or even like Sam Darnold. I don't mind Sam Darnold this week against Detroit. So it comes down to Minshew or Daniel Jones for me. Jones gets Minnesota. Minnesota's been horrible defensively. They've been really bad against the pass as well. I think Dimes is probably the guy that I'll have ranked higher, but I think it's pretty close because Minshew obviously has the infrastructure, with the weapons in Philadelphia, the offensive line in Philadelphia, but the matchup is just not there as well as it is for Daniel Jones, I should say. So Danny Dimes. I think I'm going to lean that way, but they're probably in the same tier for me this week.
I'm definitely calling him Daniel Dimes from now.
Yeah, it's like you're formal with them, and then you get all casual.
Yeah. Business in the front, party in the back.
Yeah,
I like it. Yeah, everybody. I'm starting everybody against that Minnesota defense. They've just been giving up so many points. It's insane. We got Lean in here asking, just picked up Deshaun Watson last week. Would you play him or Tua Tagovailoa? Or Dak versus Eagles.
You're not playing Deshaun Watson. I don't understand the Deshaun Watson love within the fantasy space right now. I get it from a long-term perspective, potentially, because we've seen his ceiling in the past. I'm just trying to pull up his numbers really quick so I can cite this. But Deshaun Watson in his 3 starts, he's been QB 30, 14, and 22. He scored 5.3, 16.3, and 12.6 fantasy points. Now he gets New Orleans in a snowstorm. What are Like his ceiling, this isn't like we're talking about Josh Allen playing in a snowstorm. We're talking about a guy who has literally been the lead in the worst offense in football over the last 3 weeks, or at least one of the worst offenses. So I don't get the love for Deshaun Watson, especially in this environment with a 31.5 point over under. You can't start him. He's probably going to be maybe even like a high end QB3 for me this week. Like it's one of those things you need to avoid, because there's a very, very small chance that game shoots out. Whereas, Tua has a much better scoring environment, much better weather environment, great weapons there. Green Bay is not the best matchup in the world, but I would definitely be going Tua over Deshaun Watson this week.
Yeah, and Tua is used to the cold, so really the cold in Green Bay shouldn't bother him too much, right?
But I do see this too. It says, or Dak versus the Eagles, and I think Dak is probably the play over all three. I mean, like, they have a much better. I think they have a better team total this week. Philadelphia has definitely got a good defense, and it's not going to be easy. But I think I'm still going Dak over Tua as well. But I think that one's a little bit closer.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the total on this Miami Green Bay game is set at 49.5, which is decently high. Vegas is expecting a high shootout in that game. Got to follow where Vegas thinks on that.
Yeah.
We got TKO Breezy in here asking Goff or Purdy this week if Lamar can't go.
I'm probably going to go Goff against Carolina. Beatable matchup. Purdy, I talked about earlier. I don't mind him per se, but it's not really the best matchup in the world against Washington. They're playing better defensively. They're a team that you can pass on more than you can run on, which is good from a quarterback standpoint. But Purdy, I just don't know if he's going to be able to maintain that success throwing touchdowns, which is, he's thrown 2 in each of his starts. But he hasn't had the passing yards and the passing numbers to really match that. Whereas we know that Goff can do that. So I'm going to lean Goff over Purdy.
Lean Goff over Purdy. I don't mind that. What do you think about Lamar? Do you think I know we haven't gotten any news in terms of whether he'll play this week, but if he does, what are you thinking? How are you navigating that if you were a Lamar Jackson manager?
I think you got to play him probably over most guys. I know that he's struggled, since like week 5 or so. He's only averaging like 16 or 17 fantasy points per game anyway. But it's Atlanta. It's a really good matchup for him. So I think you probably have to go Lamar. Like, I'd play Lamar over these guys. I think when you get into like the Tua and Dak range, that becomes a little bit iffier, only because Lamar, number one, hasn't been very good, like from a fantasy perspective when he's been active. But number 2, he's coming off an injury. So you don't know what that's going to look like. So I think that it's iffy, but I would play him over these guys, but over some of the other guys we talked about, maybe not.
That's totally fair. Totally fair. The one we were discussing this morning was Justin Fields or Lamar Jackson. That's tough.
I'd probably go Fields, but we have to, again, that's another weather game where we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. Like I have 2 leagues where I have both Justin Fields and Geno Smith, and Geno, if Tyler Lockett were healthy, it'd be so easy to go Geno there. Right. Going up against Kansas City, potential shootout. I'm probably still going to go Geno over Justin Fields as of today. Justin Fields, potentially bad weather situation, gets Buffalo, tough matchup. It doesn't matter. These matchups don't matter as much for these mobile quarterbacks because they're scoring points on the ground more than anything else. That's what we care about more. So like the traditional metrics that we look at for matchups and stuff aren't as pertinent with these, mobile quarterbacks, but even still, it could just be a bad weather situation in Chicago. So it's another one of those, like, you kind of got to wait and see if you're going to go that direction or not.
Totally fair. We got Dino in here. Dino Fontaine asking Zay Jones against Jets pass defense or pick up Marquise Goodwin PPR. Just talking about Geno Smith, Marquise Goodwin, presumably replacing Tyler Lockett here. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my gut and my head are kind of both saying Marquise Goodwin. I know Zay's been crushing it. I just don't like the matchup. He's a perimeter guy. They've been good against perimeter wide receivers, whereas Marquise Goodwin could see a lot of volume in this matchup against Kansas City. So I think I'm leaning Goodwin. It's close. Zay's been crushing, so I can understand if you want to go that direction. But the Jets have like a sub 20-point implied team total this week. Like, it's not that good. And it's a Thursday night game where we know things just get crazy and ugly and stupid. So I think I'm leaning Goodwin here.
Crazy, ugly, and stupid. I called those a lot in high school.
Yeah.
Alex Murphy in here saying championship matchup for me this week. Would you guys do Bam Knight or Cam Akers? Full PPR. Akers is available on the waiver wire. What do you think, JJ?
So Bam Knight gets Jacksonville. Jacksonville's a good matchup. Knight still had a high percentage of his team's running back rushes this past week. It was like 77%. It was right in line with what we'd seen from him. He just, caught a rough matchup and, just didn't do very well. Detroit's been really good against the run of late. So like, I'm not overly, nervous or upset at the fact that Bam Knight didn't really do that much in fantasy last week. It's a much better matchup this week. Cam Akers in LA, they get Denver. I mean, Akers showed a lot more in the passing game this past week, or I guess last night. That might make me lean Akers' way, but I haven't really sat down and done research on all these guys yet, so I don't want to really lean one way or another. Right now I'm probably leaning Akers, but I'm not saying that confidently because I haven't, looked at everything and made my rankings or anything yet.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I would lean Zonovan Knight here going against Jacksonville. Really, the matchup is the tiebreaker for me. I'm glad you included Zonovan Knight on your 15 transactions newsletter this week, JJ, because it felt like finally people trusted him, and then he came out and did a stinker. Just made a big boom on the bench this week.
They have a great schedule, in week 16 and 17. And like I said, his peripherals were still okay enough, but it's just one of those things where like, we have to realize that Bam Knight was never like the guy in that backfield. They were still using other running backs. He was still seeing like hovering that 50% snap share mark. Like he wasn't this like full blown bell cow, and he's not going to be that, but seeing 77% of the team's running back rushes, in a game against Jacksonville at home, you got to think that translates to like 12 or 15 touches on the ground. So I can understand going that direction. I do think, given this is full PPR, and if you want to go with the more high variance look, I think the higher variance, higher ceiling, lower floor look is probably Cam Akers, because they did use him more in the passing game last night. And that was something they've and he looked good. I mean, Cam Akers,
he did.
The last like 3 or 4 games has actually not looked bad. Some of that's the offensive line, but some of that's also him. He just, is more decisive. And so, I think that matters, as you move forward and they want to get a good look on whether or not he can really be their bell cow or not. So, I can make an argument either way here. I think it's very, very close. I'm just going to lean on the guy that actually has a pass catching profile. And that's really what it comes down to. But I can make an easy argument that Bam Knight's a better play.
Yeah, fully agree with you there. Jay said thoughts on Zach Moss versus Deion Jackson for a pickup in Indy. Jonathan Taylor going down with a high ankle sprain, likely out for at least the rest of the fantasy season, most of the regular NFL season. What do you think? Which of these two guys are you prioritizing?
It's tough. I think this is a really, really tough situation and decision to make because, what we saw in week 15 was that Zach Moss was the guy in that backfield. He played 2/3 of the team snaps. Deion Jackson saw the other third. Moss actually ran more routes than Deion Jackson. He looked fine enough on the ground. He had like a 43% success rate. So, Zach Moss was the guy for them that, if we were to be guaranteed that workload moving forward, we would absolutely be favoring Zach Moss. But here's the problem. They play with a positive game script throughout that game, as we know. And Zach Moss definitely profiles to be that kind of guy as opposed to the pass catcher, the come from behind, the hurry up type running back, which would be Deion Jackson. Now They get the Chargers this week, and the Chargers are a team that you can run the ball on. And so I do anticipate them trying to feed Zach Moss a little bit more than Deion Jackson between the tackles in that particular matchup. So I do think I'm leaning Zach Moss here, but I think it's more of like a 60-40 type situation where, it's not like, oh, absolutely go after Zach Moss. I think if you're in a PPR format, you can make the argument that it's Deion Jackson if you want to sort of lean into the way that you think game script might go. Because if game script does flip negative for Indianapolis, which is very possible in a matchup like this, then all of a sudden Deion Jackson is probably going to play more snaps than Zach Moss will. So it's a pretty volatile situation. I think Zach Moss is probably the pick, but I do think it's pretty close.
Yeah, I'm with you. That we had a lengthy debate about that on the morning show this morning on which side we fell on. I lean the Deion Jackson one, but it's kind of hard to make a case with the numbers being so heavily on Zach Moss's side just in the one game that we've had.
Right.
So I totally understand leaning towards the Moss side. Chaka in here said almost every game this week is supposed to feel like -10 degrees. Yeah.
It's a disaster.
Not good. And then follow-up question, start 2 in PPR, Christian Watson, Marquise Brown, Amari Cooper, or J.K. Dobbins?
I think you're going Watson and Dobbins there. I mean, again, I haven't studied this slate that much at all. I've looked at it just briefly, but we're in week 16, so you kind of just in the back of your head kind of know what the matchups look like immediately when you just generally know. I know that the Packers are playing the Dolphins. Okay, I know what that sort of looks like. I know that the Cardinals are playing the Buccaneers, so I kind of know what that looks like. J.K. Dobbins gets Atlanta. Atlanta's a really good matchup for everyone offensively, and Dobbins is running well. He's playing his typical role where he has to be efficient in order to really come through in fantasy because he's not going to catch that many passes out of the backfield. But with that being said, he's looked decent. I mean, he's been, I think with Dobbins, his top speed is not there right now, the same way that we've seen before. But he's hitting holes the same way. Like his vision is the same. Like that, and that's the most important part, arguably, because you're looking for those successful runs, not just those big runs.
Right.
And so I think Dobbins in a good spot. You can't play Cooper, I don't think, with this group, given the weather. Hollywood, quarterback situation's up in the air. I'm probably not going to feel very confident playing Hollywood Brown. So I'm going to go Christian Watson, who could have a big game. I mean, it's a probable negative game script for Green Bay. He still had a 21% target share last night. And then I'll go Dobbins with the other one.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, the total in this game is high. Watson, I feel like, is going to be part of that game plan, whatever it is. That makes a ton of sense. I agree with you there, JJ. And Derek in here asking Devontae Smith or Zay Jones to start at flex.
Yeah, so I still think it's Devontae Smith. I mentioned Zay having a tough perimeter matchup. That's definitely the case. I know that people are going to be nervous with no Jalen Hurts, probably no Jalen Hurts this weekend. And what that means for AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert is back too, so that could hurt them a little bit as well. The one thing that I will say about Devontae Smith and these pass catchers is that when a mobile quarterback is no longer in the picture and you get more of a traditional pocket passer, that increases the volume in that offense, the passing volume. And not only that, but now you're more likely to play with a negative game script against Dallas. And so there could just be more volume in general in that offense. And so don't feel as, there is a bump down a little bit with AJ Brown and with Devontae Smith, but I don't think it's as dramatic as people probably think because you're no longer, in the red zone and close to the goal line. Jalen Hurts is no longer stealing those touchdowns. Miles Sanders might get a little bit of a help closer to the end zone. And, there's going to be more volume just in general for these pass catchers. So, I'm still cool with Devontae Smith. I still think he's probably a wide receiver too. I haven't put my rankings together, but I still think he's probably like a low end wide receiver too. And Dallas, was beat last week. I mean, Trevor Lawrence looked good against them. So I'm going to lean Devontae Smith there.
Lean in Devontae Smith. Yeah, and if I remember correctly, Gardner Minshew was not afraid to sling it whenever he was playing. He was tossing the ball downfield. ADOT was crazy high. Let's see. We got some more questions in here. Jared asking, start Isaiah Pacheco or Jerick McKinnon? Ooh, Jerick McKinnon questions are going to be plentiful this week.
I mean, I think you have to start Jerick McKinnon. Like the bottom line is last week we all thought it was a Pacheco game, understandably so, because it was Houston, positive game script, but we can't predict game script flawlessly. Like game script can go in different ways. And these are running backs, Pacheco in particular, who is going to be more game script dependent than Jerick McKinnon's going to be. McKinnon has now seen, and this is for my 10 trends episode that's going to drop tomorrow, but Jerick McKinnon has now seen 8 or more targets in 4 of his last 7 games, which, to give you some context of what that means, Austin Eckler leads the NFL with 8+ target games at the running back position this year with 8. Christian McCaffrey has 6 of them. Jerick McKinnon and Ramondre Stevenson both have 4 of them. They're next on that list. And Jerick McKinnon's done it all 4 of those times over the last 7 games. So He's seeing so much work through the air that you really can't bench him at this point. I mean, there's a lot of targets being funneled his way, and then he sees 6 to 12 rushes on the ground. So even if game script goes in Kansas City's favor, McKinnon will still get work. You don't have to worry about game script nearly as much with McKinnon as you do with Pacheco. So I think you have to go McKinnon over those 2 running backs, or amongst those 2 running backs.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And he's looked good. Jerick McKinnon's looked very good the last few games here. Justin in Germantown, shout out 301 if that's the Maryland Germantown, benched Tua for Zach Wilson last week, and it paid off. Should I roll the dice again?
I wouldn't. I would not. Tua obviously rough matchup last week, but it's a little bit better this week. I don't think that you can. I think that you got to go with Tua.
Yeah, I'm with you. Don't get cute in the fantasy football playoffs. It'll burn you. And then you'll feel real bad about it. Jack in here asking, Christian Kirk against the Jets or Amari Cooper against the Saints?
I'd go Christian Kirk. I know the matchup on paper doesn't look great, but I think that he's the one player in that matchup that could hypothetically do all right. I'm not like totally optimistic on the Jags moving the ball down the field like they did against Dallas, like they have really over the last like month and a half. But the Jets defense is legit. But Amari Cooper in that really awful game environment,
windy, snowy.
I'm not dealing with that.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. PN asking PPR looking to fill my flex spot. ETN, Olave, Zay Jones, or Cordero Patterson.
I'm going ETN here. Olave in that really bad game. Zay Jones, really tough matchup. CPAT splitting a backfield with Tyler Algier. Not a great matchup against Baltimore. I think it's very easy then to just lean on ETN there. This is one of those start sits where like all the bad with the other guys just sort of leads you. I don't love ETN's situation or anything, but just kind of leads you right to Travis Etienne.
Right. He doesn't have as much baggage as the other guys.
Yeah.
And asking just KJ Osborne and Dawson Knox on the waiver. Would you choose one of these over Goodwin in PPR?
I don't think so. I know Osborne's a good player. Like he's got some dog in him. He was crushing it against Indianapolis this past week. And Dawson Knox is getting a little bit more involved in the Bills offense, but Marquise Goodwin should, be able to walk into probably 7 to 8 targets in this game against Kansas City. So I'm going to go Goodwin's way. Geno Smith's played well all season long. It's very strange, though, relying on this battery of Geno Smith to Marquise Goodwin in the fantasy playoffs in the semifinals. But I think from a logic standpoint, it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of lines up with how we felt all season, the craziness. Although I feel like we say that every year. I'm just going to be used to the insanity. And Justin had a kind of a follow-up question. It's a similar vein here. It's the same players, KJ Osborne, Marquise Goodwin, but Zach Moss. Does that affect your decision here, JJ? Are you still going Goodwin over Moss and Osborne?
I think I might go Goodwin still, especially if it's a PPR league, just because there's a lot up in the air about how the Colts are going to deploy that backfield. I think Moss is a good ad because if we see this week, we see him be used the same way as he was last week, and then maybe something can happen in week 17. But I think Goodwin's just a pretty safe bet going up against Kansas City.
Yeah, I'm with you. Hey, if you're enjoying the show, hit that like button on YouTube. Follow FanDuel on Twitch, on TikTok, and subscribe on YouTube. Constant content, amazing content coming out every day. You won't want to miss it. We got Michael in here asking, what do you think about James Cook?
It's a committee backfield. I'm going to pull up his numbers really quick. He hasn't seen the best target shares in the world over the last 2 weeks, and that's really what you're relying on with him. I know that he scored that touchdown this past week on a really amazing play by Josh Allen. But his peripherals just really haven't been that strong since his big, what was that, week 13 against New England, where he had a 48% running back rush share and 18% target share. And everyone's like, and beat reporters, everyone's like, oh, they're finally going to use James Cook more. And then the last 2 weeks just has not been the case. So we're kind of back to where we were with James Cook. He's a flex if you don't have a decent enough option. Hopefully he can find the end zone. Not a bad matchup this week. You got to watch the weather. How I feel about him is that he should be rostered and he might be a flex play depending on what your situation is.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I feel like that James Cook hype got compounded because it was right in prime time, so everybody was watching him play so well, and then it just hasn't quite materialized. Adam in here said, "What's up, y'all? Do you like Elijah Moore or Marquise Goodwin full PPR?" What up, Adam?
I'd probably say Goodwin because it sounds like Corey Davis, I believe, could be back this week. And if that's the case, I'm trying to look. I'm just looking up on Twitter right now to make sure that I'm correct with what I read earlier about Corey Davis. Yeah, he was limited in practice on Monday. He could be back this week. So if Corey Davis is back, I'm anticipating him being the number 2 for the Jets, which is going to limit Elijah Moore. He's been better the last couple of weeks. But that's because Corey Davis has not been active. So I'm going to go Marquise Goodwin there.
Marquise Goodwin for me as well. And Tommy asking Swift or Pacheco flex.
I think you probably got to go Pacheco. They're getting Seattle really good matchup. And, as good as McKinnon's been, Pacheco has not been that bad from a fantasy perspective. He's not been like amazing, but he's been, he's RB 38 last week, not great, but he was RB 17, RB 15, RB 16 the 3 weeks prior to that, RB 22 the week prior to that. So he's been like an RB 2 for the most part. Now they get one of the best matchups in football against Seattle. They have a really bad rush defense. I think Pacheco makes a lot of sense versus Swift, who, he's getting there through the air, and it's a good matchup this week, but I'd be afraid that it could be more of a Jamal Williams week this week.
Yeah, that would be the ultimate just screw you from Dan Campbell, the fantasy managers this week. Just pull that switch. All right, well, that's going to do it for us today on Week 16 Waiver Wire Q&A presented by FanDuel. If you're not already, make sure you're following JJ on Twitter @LateRoundQB and check out his site, lateround.com. Excellent content, indispensable resource, I promise you. JJ, you ready to get out of here?
Yeah, man.
All right. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Peace.